everyone, our second session of the Green Network is about to start. It's our penultimate session of DSP Leaders World Forum for 2023. So please get your coffees and pop over to your tables. Laptops out, phones out. If you haven't done polls, you want to send in questions, please do so. Interact with us. We'll have a chance for Q&A as well as we go through our session. So this session is developing a sustainable and innovative ecosystem. Now, as we know, in order to tackle the energy efficiency and power usage concerns that have been identified in Ray's previous session, telcos and their suppliers do need to closely collaborate to produce and implement the technology-based solutions that we absolutely need. But, what innovations are currently showing the most promise, and how do the ecosystem players identify the gains that they're making? How do they measure success? So, before we start, let me ask our guests to introduce themselves, starting on my far right with Manish.
Hi, I'm Manish Singh, CTO Dell Technologies for Telecom Systems.
Manish, good to see you again. Have you enjoyed the discussion so far?
Yeah, loved it. It's been really great to be here and really enjoyed all the discussions all the days.
Good to hear. And next to Manish.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Luis Romero, and I'm with ETSI, the Telecoms Institute. Telecoms, I shouldn't say telecoms. Standards. We're doing standards, and I guess we know you know us for not only ETSI, but 3GPP has been around for a while.
Lewis, good to have you with us, and we'll hug a telco later. Yeah. It's going to catch on, this hug a telco, believe me. And over to my left, Anita.
Anita Döhler, CEO of NGMN, the NGMN Alliance, to be precise.
Great. Anita, good to see you again. Always great to have your support. Thanks very much. And next to Anita is Mark.
Mark Gilmour, I'm CTO at ConnectiviTree.
Good to see you again, Mark. Thanks very much indeed. Right, so that's the five of us. We've got a number of talking points, so let's start with our first one. But before I do so, we ought to have a look at our poll, because we're running the same poll all afternoon. So it's the same poll question. Quick reminder. How can DSPs become more energy efficient? If you haven't yet voted in it, please do so. Okay, so let's get on to our first talking point. And the first thing I'd like to ask is, do we need to accelerate the pace of innovation in the green networking areas? And if so, how do we go about it? Anita, I know your organisation is doing a lot of work here. What's your views? Do we need to accelerate the pace of innovation, and how?
The simple answer is yes. It's always good to accelerate innovation. I would like maybe to start with another more broader view. So we covered today in the previous panel, which actually was an excellent panel, a lot about network energy efficiency. But when we talk about green networks, it's not only about network energy efficiency, it's also about other measures to reduce the carbon footprint. And that's what we are also tackling within NGMN with our entire membership. When it comes to innovation, yes, we need to accelerate it, but we also have a lot of other options already now in the networks by optimizing processes, by introducing algorithms to steer the network dimensioning, to match the actual demand at any moment in time, and other measures which we can lever already now. So let's say it's incremental innovation. And then, of course, we have the rather mid to long-term vision when we go now also to produce first requirements for 6G. Of course, that needs to be considered end-to-end in any new design.
Thanks so much, Anita. And Luis, if I can come across to you, ETSI's had a very long history of bringing together interested parties around technologies. You've got a lot of ISGs. Are you doing work to try and not stimulate, but certainly accelerate innovation in green areas?
We are, and definitely green has been in the core of ETSI for a long time. We have groups that are devoted to making green greener, or to making technologies more energy efficient. And it's been done specifically on these technologies, but also when you take, Anita was talking about 5G, 6G, one of the KPIs in 5G was already energy efficiency of the network, so the components of these networks and how they are deployed and how they are worked with need to take into account energy efficiency, how we produce more with less. So definitely it's something we're pushing, but I would like to hint at something, which is, if you look at ETSI, and I'm very grateful for that, but it's actually you. So it's actually industry is being aware that green is a must, and therefore it's them bringing their solutions, their ideas, their needs to us so that we help them collaborate into this. And I heard in the previous panel, collaboration will be key to our success in being greener.
Thanks, Lewis. And Manish, you're our vendor representative on this session. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, as far as green networks, energy efficiency, it's critical. It's here and now. First of all, it's the right thing to do. It's the good thing to do. But it's also become a P&L issue, given the energy inflationary environment we are in. And that has put a sharp focus on the needs for driving better energy efficiency on the networks. And there are a bunch of things that we are looking at, we are doing, clearly being an infrastructure provider, right? There are a lot of things we are enabling, providing the right telemetry data, enabling the workloads to really take advantage of that. We've talked about networks running at peak really designed for peak traffic. And we all know that's the low-hanging fruit, is as the traffic tapers off through the 24 hours of the day, how do we get the infrastructure to really scale up and down on power levels, right? And that's a big area of opportunity, a big area of focus for us. So that's one. And I'll just say, more broadly, Dell, across all our businesses, sustainability is a big goal. I mean, Dell has a big moonshot goal that by 2030, for every product we ship, there'll be a product that we recycle or reuse. And that's a much bigger goal that we are trying to drive. It's a moonshot, but we need that because, again, energy is efficiency, circularity is front and center in the telecom industry, but I can tell you it's front and center across multiple industries, and there's a lot of work that lies ahead for all of us to do here.
Quite. Energy efficiency and power reduction, two real key elements there we've got to work on. Mark, I guess you're in the enviable position of building out a network and looking at what's new out there. You're seeing innovation firsthand. What's your perspective on whether or not we need to do a little bit more?
So I think the position we're in right now is with the industry, our industry has accelerated, I think, in terms of green networking. I think we've done it as a matter of necessity. One, from it's the right thing to do, but secondly, and probably what has accelerated it in the board level and at the executive level, is because of the impact to the bottom line that it has. I think the challenge is then for us to maintain that momentum and continue to accelerate in terms of innovation. When hopefully that price pressure eases, we're hoping, and I think the forecast is that the energy crisis that we're in at the moment will not continue. In that we will look to other methods, etc. And so the price pressure or the cost pressure will come down. The challenge for us then as an industry is to keep maintaining that. I read just last week from multiple sources that the prediction that the world is going to exceed the 1.5 degree target or temperature increase on a more regular basis or on a regular basis has increased. I think it was 10% back in 2015. It's now 66% that we're going to do it. Not that it will be a permanent rise, but that we're going to do it. The world is likely to do it more often. So we're not at the point yet of it's irreparable and there's nothing more we can do. Doomsaying on a Wednesday afternoon, that would be terrible. But we can't take our foot off the gas, ironically. He says that in a green panel. Or we can't take our foot off the electric pedal to slow down that momentum. I think as an industry, we've done very well in that already. I think we have led the pandemic. We've talked about this before. The pandemic kind of showed the benefits of what we can do. But from a purely selfish point of view, as a wholesale operator, when I look and a lot of my customers have been in the room over this last 2 days, other carriers, I think it does come down to not just technology innovations, but also business model innovations and different ways of thinking. We have been guilty, and I've been part of that, of saying, network is king, network is our asset, network is our differentiator, and so as a result, we all go out and build our own networks. And we talked yesterday a little bit about overbuild and that. So the model does need to change because it's not sustainable economically, financially, or climatically sustainable to just keep building duplicate networks, overbuild on that. And so that does mean we have to change the way we work with each other and collaborate with each other on not just a technical level, but also on a commercial and a business model point of view. And I know I've been guilty of that in other environments in the past, in building that up, but also have seen the benefits of models such as infrastructure sharing, network sharing, those sort of things that come into play.
Good points there, Mark, and interesting that you raised the point of what happens when the price of energy falls, which it hopefully will, and will the imperative be there to continue this innovation?
Will we still have a green summit?
Yes, indeed. That's up to us as an industry to maintain that. So hopefully we all will, and we'll collaborate that way. And Anita, it was mentioned in the last panel. I think it was Hanan who mentioned this about some of the mechanisms to support the collaboration mechanisms. What are you doing with NGMN in terms of ways and mechanisms that are in place to support collaboration, so enabling this collaboration, and where do we need to make improvements to this?
Well, NGMN, as other alliances, we are by default a place for collaboration. And for instance, it was very kind when Arnaud said it was NGMN and Anita with the 5G white paper, but as Louis said, it's the industry, it's our members who produce the content, and we are enabling this. So it is per se, by default, a collaboration platform. And what I personally like a lot is that we really have the entire value chain there. So we start from academia. We have around 20 research institutes in NGMN on a global, with a global footprint. And then we have, of course, vendors, and that includes hyperscalers and system integrators. And then we have the operators. And yes, we are operator-driven, but I think it's so important that we collaborate on the way to the output. And we mentioned this already several times. One thing is the output. I liked also a lot the statement which was made in one of the earlier panels that when you work in organizations, when you contribute to organizations, it's very difficult to calculate a very clear business case. So how much do you put into such work, and what exactly do you get out? But one thing is the output, so we produce requirements, recommendations to the industry, to SDOs, and provide guidance. But the other thing is also the way, so how do you achieve this output in collaboration? Because the entire value chain learns from each other, and I think that's so important. And that we enable best practice sharing. So we did a lot of different work on green networks in the last 2 years, and big chunk, of course, is network energy efficiency, where we also will issue a new publication in due course, and it will continue that work. Circular economy, eco-design of products. How do we reduce the entire footprint of the value chain? Scope 3, so for operators who already fully embraced renewable energy, scope, so around 85 to 90% of their CO2 emissions comes from scope 3, so from the supply chain. And therefore, we also worked on supply chain circular economy criteria. We provided sourcing criteria checklist, which is available on our website for download. And then also, of course, KPIs, how to benchmark green networks. So there is a lot of work, and I'm really convinced, otherwise I would not be in this job, that the value is not only in the output, but also in collaborating and sharing best practices. Or for instance, if a vendor claims that in their tests they achieved with technology ABC in green networks an improvement of energy efficiency around, let's say, 30% or 9%, then the question is, does this really scale, and is it possible to just adopt it in a real network, in real operations? So how does it look like in real operations in a multi-vendor environment as an operator? So all those different type of information and sharing in the pre-competitive environment is so important, in my opinion.
Thanks, Anita. Manish, Anita mentioned something there about it's not just the output that's important here, it's the process of getting there. It's the collaboration which also leads to extra insights and advancements. Is that something that is important to your work?
Yeah, look, I mean, where we sit as Dell in the ecosystem, right? I mean, as an infrastructure provider, we have to collaborate, and we have to collaborate both up and down the stack. Down the stack, we are collaborating with our silicon partners, right? I mean, there's a lot of innovation that's happening. I mean, Intel was on the panel earlier. They talked about, and there's a lot of work they're doing in terms of putting all the right controls for shutting down cores or frequency scaling them down, and again, lowering the power consumption. So we have to go work with the silicon providers. Where possible, if there are opportunities to deliver better performance through accelerators or offloading of the workloads, we work with the silicon providers to do those offloading or acceleration capabilities and enable them on our platforms. We have to collaborate and then work upwards on the stack. Work, for example, with our CAS partners, Wind River, Red Hat, others, right? And again, tuning them, tuning the overall infrastructure footprint that is required for delivering, whether it's Open RAN or core network workloads. And then last but not the least, really enabling all that telemetry data for the workloads, right? Because they really need to take advantage of all these capabilities that the infrastructure is providing, and really then work and collaborate with us to really turn off different things on the infrastructure and drive energy outcomes. And last but not the least, I'll say, I mean, we heard from NGMN Alliance, the work they're doing at ETSI. Let's touch a little bit on ORAN Alliance. I'm actually very pleased to see the work that's going on in ORAN Alliance. Fundamentally, first of all, from an architecture perspective, the way that the architecture is getting decoupled, interfaces are getting open, this provides a whole new opportunity to apply things like AI and machine learning, which we've talked about, but do it to really have energy outcomes, where when you have off-peak traffics, can we turn off bands, can we turn off cells, can we shape beams in the directions where we need to have network KPIs, maintain the KPIs where they need to be, no degradation of KPIs, but have much better energy outcomes that we can achieve. So there is a whole body of work and collaboration that is happening, and there's more that we need to do to, again, deliver on these energy outcomes that we are all aspiring for.
Great, thanks, Manish. And let's quickly have a look at the room, see if there's anybody who want to throw in a question to us right in the center there. Yes, Francis. Microphone is coming in 2 seconds.
really interesting conversation on ecosystem, but we seem to be missing one key part of the ecosystem, which is the demand on our networks. If we reduce the energy, if we increase the energy efficiency of cost per bit, but at the same time our demand increases by 10 times, we haven't actually changed anything. How much do the panel feel that demand management, demand shaping, demand business models are an important part of the ecosystem that drives a green network?
Thanks very much, Francis. Mark, you were nodding there. Are you ready to?
I'll take the first part of that question, and then maybe we'll go around on the demand management piece, because to be frank, more demand is good for me as an operator and as a business. But the ability to do more and carry more data for less power is great in terms of energy. And one of the things we've been doing as we set up our business models and our approach is looking at that very point. Now, I have a slight problem with the metric of amount of data per bit per watt, because that's all very well and good if the network is at capacity or is at high utilization. It becomes a utilization question and problem, because the technology that I'm using today, we did a study. If I was to build what I'm building today on technology from 10 years ago, then essentially I'm able to carry and deliver much more power, much more data, but basically the reduction is over 80% in terms of the power per bit per power per watt, the watt per bit. I hate it as a metric. And I can do that in less space with less cooling, and so the overall metric becomes really good. However, actually running the box that does that requires more power than what it did 10 years ago. So I can do more in a smaller space, and I can do more with that technology, but actually to run it, so if it's running empty and I'm running it, it's actually more, it's taking more energy than it did 10 years ago, which comes back to my point about business models and the way we approach things. So I have, so there's work to be done on that side of, in terms of the demand, because the demand is increasing, will increase, and to be honest, that's good for my business. I like that, but to be able to deliver more for less is certainly a place I want to be at. But the only way I can realize that is by utilizing that space. And so then I can turn that into a metric for my customers in terms of their scope 3, because actually it's more efficient from an energy point of view, from a green network point of view, for that data, where appropriate, to be transported on my network than it is to be done on their own network on that. And that then translates into a scope 3 sort reduction, or part of their scope 3 piece, which goes back to Anita's point about the whole end-to-end piece, not just scope 1 and scope 2, which I think we're doing a good job on, but actually then translating that into what does that mean for my supplier customers.
Very interesting. Thanks very much, Mark. Any other comments to add to what Mark said, Lewis?
Well, very, very quickly, because it has to do, I think this is a long-standing demand. How can we flatten the traffic pattern in networks? Because actually what you're looking, when you build a network and have your servers and everything, depends on your peak hour. So the point is, can we flatten the demand?
Or manage it better across the network.
Right.
So you can steer and you can move traffic around to be able to manage that, rather than just have a peak in that particular part.
If you take it to the limit, you only have one network, and then you still have the peak. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's the same thing. So how you manage this peak, which is even the electrical companies have this problem, or have had this problem for ages. So and I think that's the difficult part. How are you able to manage this flattened traffic? Because then what I know is being done is, well, all those servers not being used, how can we, switch them off or turn them off so that they don't consume and so on and so forth. But you still need them at some point in time. So there's a lot going on there. I know there's a lot of work being carried about, but it's I think the everlasting question: how are we able to manage and handle this traffic, as you say?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably add. I mean, I think first of all, more demand is good. It's our job as an industry. That's why we exist, to meet that demand. So my view is, demand's a great signal, and I would argue that we want more of that demand. And we know the traffic's doubling, every 12, 18 months, depending where you look at in different parts of the world. So that's a good thing. There is a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit right in front of us. I mean, I'll just go back to the discussion, the panel we were having yesterday, where BT, Howard Watson, was talking about how in their own infrastructure they're seeing servers in off-peak hours running at 11%, 20%, etc. These are all low-hanging fruits that we need to really go after, and we can deliver more for less, if I put it that way. If we think from an energy outcome perspective, whether you're doing workload consolidation, and this is where, again, the disaggregation, cloud-native characteristics, they start to become very important, or whether, again, as I said, during off-peak hours, we're bringing the infrastructure down, be it on the radio side, be it in the data center, drive better PUE, power usage efficiency, inside the data center. So when we think about building the infrastructure, putting energy efficiency front and center as we design that, these are all the opportunities we need to go after to meet all the demands coming. Last thing I'll say is this. We've talked about the network demand and how we manage that, and that varies through the days and hours in the day, etc. One of the things we haven't talked about is AI, and there was a panel earlier that was talking about that. Actually, it's the AI machine learning that is something that we need to take a much closer look at in terms of compute power, raw compute power that's required there to train these models, and what we need to train and retrain these models, and what's the energy impact of those from network and energy efficiency perspective. That's a bigger problem statement that's sitting in front of us as an industry that we'll have to tackle as we move forward.
The misuse of AI. Using it to do a 1 + 1 calculation.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. If you look at what it takes to train a large language model in the Gen AI world, I mean, that tells us what's the next problem that we really need to be thinking about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is definitely an area that we certainly want to develop more and bring more people into the discussion, because it's a bit overlooked at the moment, but we want to try and bring that to the forefront. Anita, you wanted to...
Yeah, just to add, to complement what was said already, I fully agree that, it's a matter of fact that the demand will grow, and we need to deliver more with ideally less resources and the lower energy consumption across all the different elements. But we do have... the industry made its homework already. I mean, we know where the majority of energy consumption is going to. That's the radio access network. And there is already also optimization and engineering with regards to cell sites architecture by, for instance, using relatively simple measures like shortening cables by going to bus-based architectures, just to mention a few things, which already is delivering quite a good improvement in the efficiency, because energy losses are reduced and other topics like innovative cooling mechanisms as well. So I think that there are a lot of topics which do not demand a complete new technology and complete new innovation, but more what I meant with incremental innovation or engineering optimization, where we can already gain a lot more with regards to energy efficiency.
Thanks, Anita. I mean, you've led this conversation very nicely into our next talking point, where we wanted to look at some of the innovations that we are seeing, the ones that are showing the most promise. And we've already mentioned a fair few here already. Lewis, as you said at the beginning, ETSI exists to service the needs of the industry. The industry tells you what it wants to do, and you kind of facilitate that. Is there anything that you're seeing coming in from the industry that they're developing that is showing promise to you?
Well, actually, all that industry is doing now in their thoughts of the next generation of mobile is very encouraging, because in fact, putting sustainability as one of the key design factors of the next generation is great. It already was in 5G, but you know, come on, we're standards guys. We take our time to think. It's coming. I think we've woken up to the fact that we need to be more efficient in the use of our network elements of everything. We've talked about cloud native before. We've talked about all management systems, how important they are, how we need to consume only what we need to use, and shut off or shut down all which is not being used, being able to cleverly start up when we need it, and this is coming. So I think it's a great move towards having more efficient, let's call it, networks in the future.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Manish, in the previous panel, we mentioned, or they mentioned, the RIC, for example. I mean, as an example of a technology that's here now, has been developing now, brand new, that is showing a lot of promise and relevance for the green network. Any other innovations that you are seeing in the here and now that are going to be helpful?
Yeah. Let me just go up and down the stack on the RAN side, right? So starting at the bottom of the tower, you have your baseband functions, clearly taking advantages of different C states, B states, able to scale cores, shut down cores, scale cores down, really drive better energy efficiency at the bottom of the tower, including even some simpler things like lowering the fan speeds and when you are offload, right? So that's there. Let's go where the real energy is sitting, which is at the top of the tower on the radio. And in particular, how do we improve the PA efficiency, which is where the real energy is sitting. So there was a question earlier I was hearing that was getting asked on how do we measure this? I think that's a question. How can we improve, and what do we do in terms of improving the PA efficiency, and how can we apply AI and machine learning to improve things like DPD, et cetera, on that PA itself to drive better energy efficiency outcomes? Or now let's think of it from a RIC perspective, right, that you talked about. As we go into off-peak hours and into night hours, can I turn off cells? Can I turn off bands? Can I shape beams in a way that I can cover more for less number of active cells? While when the traffic comes back, I light up other cells, meet the demand that's coming, that's good, let's meet the demand, but when that demand dies off, we can still deliver much energy outcomes. So if you really look up and down the stack, the opportunities are all there. And the good news is this is now becoming a key focus area for the industry. And I'll say this is also a great area for everyone to differentiate themselves as we move forward, drive more innovation in here.
Yeah, actually, Manish, you brought to my mind something that we are working on for not so long, but which is important, which is on the radio side, these reconfigurable intelligent surfaces, whereby you could be able to improve your coverage or your capacity without much energy consumption, which is something great. That it's also, we believe, one of these building blocks for the future generations.
Sure.
And something that will be required as we move up on the spectrum into higher frequency bands. Absolutely. Anyway. So, yeah.
You know, radio is a power-hungry beast. It's that part of the network is hugely power-hungry. Mark, you're not in radio, different part of the business. Yeah. But what promising technologies are you seeing?
Well, what really encouraging for me is the innovation that's happening there in the RAN side of things, which is where the biggest consumption is, and that those efficiencies, that innovation starts to trickle its way then into other parts of the network, and working, with the silicon providers and things like that. That starts to make its way into like the photonics networks, and the routing and switching portfolios, and to make its way in that, so it comes across the whole of the network infrastructure. We start with where the problem is the most acute, and then or chronic, I suppose, and then that trickles down into the rest of the business. So I'm encouraged by that sort of effort that's going on. The other area is cooling, particularly in data centers. My business is data centers to data center sort of traffic. So the ability to put innovative cooling capabilities into that. We're not quite there yet in my part of the network, but I really want to see that, because that makes a significant impact. And like you say, the turning down of fan speeds, that sort of thing, really, really simple stuff. Being able to run our equipment at a slightly higher temperature, and still get the performance. That is really, these little changes that then can make a significant difference there.
Great. There's one more area I do want us to touch on before we wrap up this panel, and that's how we all measure our success here. And, Anita, perhaps I could come to you first. How do the different players in the ecosystem measure the gains they're making and, benchmark their success in a way?
So that's one reason why we delivered the publication on KPIs and benchmarking, to help also network operators by themselves to benchmark where they are. So for instance, the project team came up also with target values by analyzing a high number of operator data to provide some benchmark targets with regards to energy efficiency combined with quality of service. I mentioned this already yesterday in a panel, that that's actually extremely important that we don't forget the quality of service, so to link both. And then also some other KPIs on general sustainability topics. And the other big topic is metering. So we really need to harmonize the architecture for metering. I mean, we are moving to disaggregated networks. But if we do not have a harmonized common architecture and way how to measure topics, it will be very hard to identify in an objective manner the areas where the biggest saving potentials are, and also it will be hard to benchmark the improvements. So those are areas we are working on, and we will continue our work there together with other topics like general energy efficiency measures and circular economy.
Great, thanks, Anita. Mark, is it important for you to be able to sort of compare with other players and look even at your own progress and against agreed KPIs and specs?
For me, it's less important to compare with others, but definitely important to measure and to report on that measure, because I'm a firm believer that where we measure performance, then performance improves. Where it's then reported, then the rate of improvement increases. So, but I'm less concerned about comparing it to others, because I think that drives the wrong behavior. And I think that's the constant thing we have to be careful with KPIs, is that it doesn't drive the wrong behavior. Because ultimately, what is the outcome that we want to get to from a sustainability point of view? The sustainability angle is that we want to make sure that we're not warming the planet. And if we're just putting in KPIs that allow us to give ourselves a pat on the back and say, I'm doing great, And I think it was Howard yesterday that mentioned it. We've got to be careful not to push the problem onto our end customers. I'm good, but actually I've given them a CPE that is hugely power hungry. But that's okay. That's not my problem. That's somebody else's, because they've got that plugged in and they're generating it. So I think we've got to be careful of how we design those KPIs, and I think the work that's being done is very mindful of that. I think we're being responsible as an industry, because ultimately the demand, going back to the demand question, if we're doing it right, then actually our input is helping other industries in their ability to reduce down. So if our demand is going up, is that because then we're enabling other industries to reduce down, I don't know, their global travel or their ways of working, change ways of working?
Great points. Thanks, Mark. Lewis?
Yeah, very, very quickly, because you raised two interesting things here. One is with regards to KPIs, which I believe that if at least people get together and really address these KPIs as something that the industry has to achieve, and those are very valid KPIs. And as Anita was saying, I think it's very important that we are able to measure and set ourselves targets to get there, and that's where standards can help, because it's actually yourselves who are coming to say, hey guys, we need to get there, and that's it. The second part is also very interesting, which is about, well, can our industry help reduce, for instance, the carbon footprint that bring other sectors, and travel and is one of the usual ones. And then it's us, the first ones, who do actually need to come to a meeting like this and have a discussion. So there's also a cultural shift that we might have to address when it comes to how we save and how we behave with regards to being energy efficient and so on and so forth. But it's for another debate.
This is developing, isn't it? Absolutely. Thanks, Lewis. And quickly, Manish, I'll come to you for some final comments here about the importance of being able to, I guess, self-measure is more important than measuring against the community as in large.
No, I think both, in my view. I think, first of all, developing a common language and a common framework that we all understand and we interpret is actually a good thing that we should be moving towards. Definitely self-measurement, self-goals, moonshot goals, each business, each company, each operator, each vendor should have. But I think developing those common frameworks is important, because here's why. I think the buying decisions of the future, if we look in the future, is also going to depend on which companies, and especially I'm talking about the next generation, that they would look at this and who's really doing and making a difference and driving things forward. So I think some of those frameworks would really help in bringing that competition.
As long as they're robust. As long as they're robust.
As long as they're robust, I completely agree, yes. Common frameworks, common understanding of that, and then yes.
Good positive comments to end our session on. Manish, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We must leave it there for now. We are going to have another short break, only 20 minutes. Just about time for a coffee. I think I can manage one more. We will see you here at 4:15, 4:15, when Ray and his guests will be wrapping up both the Green Network and the DSP Leaders World Forum. Try saying that. What a tongue twister. For now, thank you to our panelists. Thank you.